Daniel had always been the kind of man who found comfort in structure. Wake up at 6:45 a.m., brew his dark roast, feed the cat, check emails before the city came alive. His world was neat, quiet, and reliable, until Emily burst into it like a beam of sunlight through dusty blinds. From the moment they met at a mutual friend's New Year's Eve party, Daniel was drawn to her laughter, not just because it was bright and honest, but because it made everything around her feel warmer. Within 6 months, they were living together. Within 2 years, married. Emily added color to his grayscale life. Literally. She painted their bedroom light lavender and insisted on yellow curtains in the kitchen because, she said, sunlight should have something to dance on. She sang while brushing her teeth. She turned laundry folding into a duet. She kissed him on the cheek every single morning. Without fail, their marriage for the first 5 years was the kind of thing people write anniversary posts about. Cozy, kind, and full of little rituals. On Mondays, they ordered Thai and watched documentaries. On Fridays, they made homemade pizza together. Sunday mornings were sacred. Coffee in bed, jazz on vinyl, no phones allowed. They even shared a shared calendar called Team D+E-, where they logged grocery runs, anniversaries, and cheeky reminders like, kiss me at 7:03 p.m. Daniel often thought to himself, if this isn't happiness, I don't know what is. He worked from home as a systems analyst and often took breaks just to watch her walk through the door after work. Hair tousled by the wind, cheeks pink from the cold, always with a tired smile that still melted him. Sure, they had their little arguments. Who didn't? She hated how he left water rings on the wooden table. He teased her for always buying -one more houseplant. But even their disagreements ended with laughter and kisses. To the outside world, they were flawless. To Daniel, they were unshakable. But what he didn't see, what no one could, was the silent shift that had already begun. A small detail here, a missed kiss there. Emily was still holding his hand in public, still saying, I love you, but something unspoken, was starting to slip through the cracks, and Daniel, so wrapped up in the warmth of routine, didn't notice the chill at the edges. Not yet. It started with little things Daniel would have never noticed if he hadn't been so in love with the rhythm of their life one evening. Emily came home and didn't play their usual, how was your day? Game. She just smiled distractedly, kissed him on the forehead instead of the lips, and said she was too tired to talk. He thought nothing of it. Everyone had off days, right? But then it happened again the next week, and then the week after that. Slowly, their easy conversations started shrinking. Where once she would excitedly recount funny moments with clients or odd customers, now she simply said it was fine and vanished into the bedroom. Her phone, which used to be left lying around without a care, was now always either in her hand or tucked face down in her bag. She started taking longer showers, locking the bathroom door, which she'd never done before. When he jokingly asked if she was hiding state secrets, she smiled, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. Daniel noticed the changes. Of course he did. He wasn't blind, but he didn't want to seem paranoid. He told himself she was probably stressed at work or maybe just going through a phase. People change. Even love changes. That's what the books say, right? But deep down, a strange sense of unease had begun to settle in his chest. A quiet voice whispering that something wasn't quite right, that he was watching a familiar painting slowly being repainted in unfamiliar colors. Then one night, lying beside her in bed while she scrolled endlessly on her phone, Daniel softly said, "You've been distant lately." Emily blinked, startled. Distant? No, I'm just tired. That's all. He reached for her hand, but she pulled it away gently, muttering, "I'm just not in the mood for cuddling tonight. Sorry?" He stared at the ceiling long after she fell asleep, listening to her calm breathing while his thoughts ran wild, and that voice in his head grew louder. "Something is changing, and you're not part of it." Daniel tried to shake the doubt, but it clung to him like damp clothes after a storm. He started watching more carefully. Not in a paranoid way, he told himself, just observant, every change, every shrug, every, "I'll be home late tonight, don't wait up," began to carve its way into his heart like little knives. It was one of those late evenings that really stuck with him. Emily came home later than usual, around 11 p.m. and her perfume was different. It wasn't the soft vanilla scent she always wore. This was sharper, more floral, like something she wouldn't have picked for herself. She said she'd grabbed drinks with coworkers, that it had been an exhausting but good day. But her hair was perfectly in place, her lips had a slight smudge of red. She rarely wore lipstick for work. Daniel smiled and nodded, playing the role of the supportive husband. He even kissed her on the cheek, but inside, he felt a wave of cold crawl through his chest. The next morning, while making breakfast, he noticed something else. A new name popped up on Emily's phone while it lay charging. Alex C. The message preview only showed a single heart emoji. Daniel didn't ask. He didn't need to. His hands trembled slightly as he flipped the pancakes. She never mentioned an Alex at work before. That day, he looked through their old photos of their honeymoon, weekend hikes, silly selfies in bed, trying to convince himself she still loved him. But those frozen smiles on his screen suddenly felt like ghosts. And for the first time in years, Daniel didn't text her, "I miss you," during her lunch break, because he wasn't sure anymore if the Emily he loved still existed, or if she was already slipping away into someone else's arms. The distance between Daniel and Emily started to grow, not with shouting matches or angry outbursts, but in the quietest ways. She'd sit across from him at dinner, scrolling her phone with a half smile he hadn't seen in months. When he asked how her day went, her answers were shorter: fine, same as always, or tired. Daniel, on the other hand, became quieter too, but not out of peace. It was the kind of silence that came from holding too much inside. He began to dread evenings, not because Emily was hostile or cold, but because she seemed like a roommate more than a wife, someone sharing the same space, breathing the same air, but living a life completely apart. One night, while Emily was in the shower, Daniel sat on the edge of the bed staring at her phone left on the nightstand. It was unlocked. He hesitated, his heart pounded so hard it felt like it might bruise his ribs. But his trembling fingers picked it up anyway. There was no message history with Alex C-none. Completely clean, too clean. But when he opened the photo gallery, he noticed a hidden album called Recently Deleted. His hands were ice. Inside were blurred selfies of Emily in the car, wearing makeup he hadn't seen her in lately. One photo stood out. She was in a dimly lit restaurant, a glass of red wine in hand, leaning forward with a playful smile. Across the table, only a man's shoulder and hand were visible, his wristwatch glinting under the candlelight. Daniel put the phone down right before she came back into the room. "Everything okay?" she asked, toweling her hair, her eyes scanning him for a beat too long. He smiled. "Yeah, just tired." But inside, something was cracking open. For the first time, Daniel realized he was starting to grieve the marriage, and Emily wasn't even gone yet. Over the next few weeks, Daniel found himself becoming a different version of himself. One he didn't recognize, and one he didn't particularly like. He wasn't a jealous man by nature, but now, every beep of Emily's phone sent his stomach into a knot. Every time she smiled at a message and quickly locked the screen, it chipped away at the trust they had once built. Emily, on the surface, was still kind, still kissed him goodbye in the morning, still asked if he wanted anything from the store. But those things began to feel rehearsed, as if she was playing the role of a wife she no longer wanted to be. Daniel couldn't shake the image of that hidden photo, the wristwatch, the smirk in her smile, the flicker of intimacy she hadn't shown him in months. He tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was an old friend, maybe she was just venting, maybe. But no, the instinct in his gut was too sharp now to ignore. He started noticing more patterns. She would suddenly get last-minute calls from a coworker and have to leave the house dressed just a little too nicely. She'd return hours later, her lipstick faintly smudged, her perfume stronger than it had been earlier. One evening, she told Daniel she was heading to a late yoga session. But something in her voice was too careful, like she had rehearsed even that lie. So Daniel waited 10 minutes, then got into his car and followed her. She didn't go to yoga. She drove across town and parked in front of a small cafe. A few minutes later, a man in a leather jacket, the same broad shoulders from the photo, approached her car, leaned in, and kissed her through the window. Daniel froze in his seat. His hands clenched the steering wheel so tight his knuckles turned white. He wasn't angry yet. He wasn't crying. He just sat there in complete stillness, as if the world had gone silent. The only sound was the dull thump of betrayal beating in his chest. He watched them laugh and walk inside together, and that's when Daniel knew. This wasn't suspicion anymore, it was fact. His wife, Emily, was having an affair, and he was now living a lie. Daniel didn't sleep that night. He lay next to Emily in bed, listening to the steady rhythm of her breath, trying to imagine how many times she had lied while lying in that very spot. She curled into him in her sleep, as if nothing had changed, but for Daniel, everything had. By morning, he had already made up his mind, but not in the dramatic movie scene way he once imagined. There was no shouting, no throwing clothes out the window. This required something colder, smarter, more controlled. He needed proof, not just for himself, but in case Emily tried to twist the truth later. So Daniel began documenting quietly. He took photos of her text logs left open on the iPad they shared. He screen-recorded notifications that flashed on her laptop. He even bought a small voice recorder and slipped it into the pocket of her gym bag. Days passed. Every moment felt like espionage. He hated it. He hated himself for becoming someone who spied, who doubted, who stalked his own wife's movements like a stranger. But every new discovery crushed his heart further. The man's name was Eric, a coworker from her office, married, with 2 kids. Daniel found screenshots of their messages, coded but clear phrases like, "I missed last Thursday," or "same spot tonight." Turned his stomach. She used emojis she used to send to Daniel when they first started dating. He stared at one heart-shaped reply for nearly 5 minutes, remembering how much it once meant when it came from her. Then came the final blow. A voice message, Emily's voice, soft and breathy, whispering, "Last night felt perfect. I still smell you on me." Daniel felt like he was underwater, drowning in his own living room. He sat on the floor for what felt like hours. No tears, just silence. But in that silence, a plan began to form. This wasn't just betrayal anymore, it was war. Daniel didn't want revenge in the traditional sense. He didn't want to scream at Emily or post her secrets online. What he wanted was clarity. A way to reclaim control in a life that had suddenly veered off course. And more than that, he wanted her to know that he knew. But not yet. He started small. He changed the password on the Wi-Fi when Emily asked, half laughing, if there was a glitch. Daniel just said, "Must be the router." He watched her shrug and go back to her phone, oblivious that she was now disconnected from her backup of messages. Next, he synced their iCloud account to a new device. A burner phone he bought in cash. Every message she sent, every picture she took, quietly mirrored to his pocket. He saw how often she talked to Eric, morning check-ins, midday selfies, nighttime longing texts with hearts and kiss emojis. "I miss your hands," she had written once, the same day Daniel had brought her lunch at the office, kissing her forehead as he left. He remembered how she smiled at him then, and how fake it now felt. But Daniel didn't let his face betray anything. If anything, he became sweeter, more attentive. He started making Emily's coffee again in the mornings, the way she liked it, with almond milk and a sprinkle of cinnamon. He rubbed her shoulders at night. Even as he imagined those same shoulders in another man's hands, Emily noticed his tenderness and commented, "You've been amazing lately." "It feels like old times," Daniel smiled. "I'm just lucky to have you inside." The words burned. Then came the final phase. He waited until a Saturday. Emily had told him she was going to visit her sister out of town, but Daniel already knew the truth. She'd booked a hotel downtown, room 412, under Eric's name. He watched her pack, pretending to yawn as she kissed him goodbye. Then, 10 minutes later, he followed. At 8:37 p.m. Daniel sat across the street from the hotel in his car. The burner phone buzzed. A picture came through. Emily and Eric, in bathrobes, champagne glasses in hand, standing close, too close. Daniel stared at the image, then looked at the envelope on the passenger seat beside him. Inside, printed messages, timestamps, screenshots, receipts. He didn't plan to use them yet. But now he had everything. And tomorrow morning, she would know exactly what she had done, and just how far Daniel was willing to go to reclaim his dignity. Sunday morning arrived with an eerie stillness. Daniel woke up before the alarm, his heart pounding with purpose. Today wasn't about vengeance. It was about truth, and he was ready to show Emily the reflection she'd been too blind to see. At 9:14 a.m. The front door creaked open. Emily walked in, wearing oversized sunglasses and a hoodie too warm for spring. Her hair was slightly damp, her perfume mixed with hotel soap. Daniel sat at the kitchen table, sipping his coffee slowly, as if it were any other lazy Sunday. "Hey," she said, forcing a casual tone. "I'm back. Traffic was awful." He didn't answer right away, just nodded and gestured to the seat across from him. There was an envelope on the table, thick, sealed, and addressed simply. To Emily, she raised an eyebrow, her fingers trembling slightly as she picked it up. "What's this?" Daniel leaned back in his chair, eyes steady. "Proof. Proof of what?" she asked, almost laughing, but her voice cracked mid-word. Daniel didn't flinch. "Proof of every lie you've told, every kiss you gave to someone else, every time you thought I was too blind or too stupid to notice." Silence. Emily opened the envelope. Inside were screenshots of her texts with Eric, printed photos from the iCloud sync, a receipt for the hotel stay, and a still image of her and Eric, smiling in bathrobes, time-stamped last night. Her breath hitched, her hand instinctively reached for her phone, but Daniel was quicker. He slid it across the table. "Already unlocked. I synced your iCloud 3 weeks ago," he said coldly. "I know everything, every word, every emoji." Tears welled in her eyes, but Daniel didn't move. "You were everything to me," he continued, voice calm but firm, "and I would have forgiven anything, except being made a fool." "Daniel, she began. "No," he interrupted. "Don't insult either of us by trying to spin this. You chose him over and over, while I was here loving you, trusting you." Emily crumbled into the chair, the weight of her betrayal suffocating. "I didn't mean to hurt you, but you did," he said, standing, "and now I'm taking back my self-respect." He walked out, leaving her surrounded by evidence and silence. Outside, the sun felt brighter. Daniel inhaled deeply, feeling the burn of heartbreak and the freedom of finally knowing the truth. He didn't know what came next, but whatever it was, it would be without lies,